Well, hi, everybody. Welcome into UnAnchored Boston. Once again, another great episode coming up this week and a great guest. And as always, Cold Springs RV brings you this edition of UnAnchored Boston. It's your destination for all things camping. And where? Well, we're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray at the great George Gray's Lexington Toyota. And speaking of great, we've got a great guest today. You better live up to that, Nate. Nate Greenberg, who has an anniversary coming up this week, the next month, rather. It'll be 50 years ago. He was hired by the Boston Bruins. We're going to have some fun talking about some stories. And with Bob Lobel, I'm Mike Lynch. And Lobie, take it away.
50 years ago, Nate, how the heck did they hire you?
Why
did they hire you 50 years ago?
That too is, they've been asking that question for the last 50 years. But mentioning that, of course, I should duly note, as you well remember, Lobie, so it had to have been 49 plus years ago that I made this horrendous drive from Boston to Manchester, New Hampshire in an absolute blizzard to do an interview with some guy on some radio station in Manchester, New Hampshire, and like a little garage area we were in. And when I tell you, halfway up, I said to myself, my God, I don't know if I should turn around or not. The snow was coming down in buckets. But I said, no, I've committed to this. And so just shy of 50 years ago, I drove to Manchester, New Hampshire to be on a sports show with Bob Lobel.
That was I'll never forget it. I couldn't believe you showed up. First of all, I couldn't believe that. Well, anyway, it was a long time ago in a place far away, but a lot of water's come under the bridge.
Boy, I guess.
A lot of water. And I mean, Lynch and I got plenty to talk to you about. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the Bruins. I mean, I have a couple of things I wanted to bring up too about the PGA on prime time, and also Jack Jones of the Patriots, and idiots as that they are, and stuff like that. But the hockey players, they're different. They've always been different. Your attitude, the attitude of the Bruins, thanks to you, has always been different. And I only say that, and I think Lynch, you would agree 100%, as would 100. I could poll 100 other people, including the late Bob Newmeyer, who would absolutely say the same thing. There was nobody like Nate Greenberg, and why he didn't get hired by the Red Sox, which is another story for another. We'll get into that. But why it was the perfect match. I don't know how you managed to juggle Harry, Cherry, Mooney, and Jacobs all together. How did you?
Well, I'll tell you, the good news was, Harry was my boss for all my 34 years. And when he sort of yielded his position, that was the end of me as well, which, I was disappointed at the time, but you get over it. 34 years. No, as you know, nobody leaves exactly the way they wanted to leave. But I'll tell you something, Harry was terrific. As you guys both well know, Harry Warris, and still does to this day, and he's soon to be 91 years old. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and if you said something he didn't like, he would tell you. There was no whispering or no, gee, I wonder what Harry thinks of this. If he saw you, he'd stop you and tell you, I didn't like what you said, or I didn't like what you did. And as you guys well know, he chewed out a lot of media in the city of Boston. He was,
myself included. He got me pretty good a couple of times. I remember we went to lunch at the Polcari's or something, and he had his say. You were there.
Yeah. Oh, you know how many of those I had with some of the great names in Boston sports history. Tim Horgan, Joe Fitzgerald, Vince Doria when he was the Globe Sports editor. I mean, we had. He was, but I'll tell you this, and I've told him many times, and I've told others, that he never once said to me, don't talk to that guy, don't do this. He knew that I had a friendship with you and a friendship with Lynchy and a friendship with whoever, and he never once said to me, don't talk to them, don't deal with them. He had his thing to do. I had my thing to do, and he never, ever once, for whatever he might have thought of the situation or the guy who said it, or the gal who said it, he was always great with it, no problem. And I said I still have a wonderful relationship with him, but as my boss for 34 years, he knew that I know he knew that I had the best interests of the team involved, and we had more than a few discussions. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't say there were arguments. I had more than a few discussions with him over the years about certain things. He asked my opinion about. Fortunately, he didn't ask my opinion about hockey players, but he asked my opinion about, what did I think about this, or what should we do, or how should we handle it, and there was some tense moments behind closed doors, and he knew once they closed the door, once we opened the door and came out, that we were on the same page, because he was the boss, and whatever he wanted, I made my case to him as best I could. More often than not, he bought it. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he'd be damn nasty about it, to be perfectly candid with you. But he knew that when I left his office, we were on the same page, and that's the way we operated. So for whatever credit I've taken and praise, I always mention that if Harry had said to me, "Don't deal with this guy, don't let this station in," he certainly was not a media savvy guy. He understood what their role was and all, but he was a hockey player. He was his whole life played hockey, coached hockey, president, general manager. He never ever, and as you both well know, back in the day, in 1973, when I started, I was a party of one. It's not like you have, today they have 50 people. I bet you can call, any of these teams. They're loaded with, internet people, and I was it. What I was able to do was bring guys in, like you both remember the late Frankie Bonner was a fireman in Newton. But, he was the best guy I could get for a game night. Come in, handle things. Nothing was a problem. Get things done. It was an entirely different time back then. But Harry should take a lot of the credit for it, because he let me do what I wanted to do and what I thought was best.
I can't remember any general manager of any one of the four big pro teams, maybe Lou Gorman, who was as accessible as Harry Sinden. Was that a collaborative effort between you and Harry, or was that just his nature?
Well, I mean, collaborative to the degree that I'd say, I had to, he said he wore his heart on his, still does, wears his heart on his sleeve, not afraid to tell you what he thinks. But he and he realized it was important to the franchise to get it out there, get the product out there, get the publicity. He was very good about it, and I was actually telling a couple of years ago, telling a guy, I spoke to this PR group at BU, and I said, back in the, and you both can relate to this. I said, we used to have a hospitality room, and during the playoffs, a big suite, and we'd have booze in there. We'd have sandwiches in there after games and before games and after games and all. And Harry would come in, Tom Johnson, a couple of the scouts. Sometimes the coach might show up for a beer. I mean, we had and we never ever had a problem. Everything that was said, and there was lots that was said in those nights, believe me, especially as it got later into the night, especially after we had taken another ass whooping from the Montreal Canadiens, and to be down and disappointed and all, and everything was kept in the room. There was nothing ever, it was never a problem. I said, Lobie mentioned Neumeier. He was one of the real classics, Neumeier. He knew how to get under Harry's skin. Every once in a while, he'd make some offhanded comment for the express purpose of getting Harry teed off, right? And he was a master at it. And Harry be barking at him, you effing guys, and this and that. And at the end of the night, they end up laughing, shaking hands, and off they went into the night. But to have a room with Of course, obviously there wasn't the numbers of media that there are today with internet people and all. Everybody's an insider today. Everybody's got an insider, but it was a fairly intimate group, but a fun group, and we had lots of fun nights. And I can't tell you. Well, you will know. I mean, how many? Especially you will both identify with this. Your photographers who were there, the guys, and they came too. And they didn't get a lot back in the day. I mean, you guys got all the attention, and here these guys were lugging their equipment and cameras and all, and they would come up to the room, and they thought this was the greatest, the best part of the whole trip was to be in the room after the game, free food, booze, and lots of fun entertainment, and they loved it. And I said, that was part of the gig back then. Today, I'm told that they haven't done anything like that in 20 years. They don't want media separate. This is for us. That it's all changed. That's basically what I'm saying. The business has changed, and
everybody
I would submit not for the better, but
everybody in that organization, and it seemed like everybody in that sport back then was accessible.
Yes,
there was an
absolutely.
accessibility that just didn't exist today.
A lot of that, Lobie, was the thought back in the day was that hockey players didn't have the buildup that baseball, football, basketball players, especially in this country. Obviously, there were lots of back in the 70s. It was obviously predominantly Canadians, and who I might add all worked during the off season. It wasn't like they were making big money. They all had to get part-time jobs, and they were very humbled. Parents. There's hundreds of millions of stories of parents having to take their kids to practice at 4:00 in the morning, and cold, dark, dreary arenas. Bring them to practice, and if that doesn't humble you, nothing will. Right? Having to get up at that hour and go work out, and it was. And I thought back then that was a big part of the equation, that they didn't have the buildup that a lot of the other teams had. The interesting thing is, it appears to me, again, I've been out of it for 16 years now, but for the most part, there's still a pretty good bunch of guys. The only guy I know from this current team from my time was Bergeron, who you can search hard and long to find somebody better than Bergeron. I mean, he's a terrific guy, personable. What you see is what you get. And as you said, as a group, you couldn't beat them. I said if I had to ask those guys, and I'll throw this in while I'm rambling here, that my biggest issue starting off in the 73-74 season was trying to get our good friend Robert G. Orr to come out of the trainer's room to talk to the media. And he was, obviously he was a huge star at the time, and and still is. But here I was, he's a year older than me, so we're about the same age at the time, 24, 25 years old, pleading with him to please come out of the locker room to talk to the press, when, his rationale, which was only Orr at the time, he wanted the other guys to get notoriety. Talk to somebody else. Talk to, Dallas Smith or Rick Smith or whoever. Everybody wanted to talk to him every night. So and guys who pleaded, can we get Orr? Can we get? And so I would tiptoe in, scared shitless to say the least, and say to him, please could you come out and speak? And he told me where to go. Believe me, more than one night. But I took it in good humor, because I know what he was doing. He was trying to share the spotlight.
Have you ever come across anybody like him? I mean, we know his on ice skills, but off the ice.
No, and not to get into a long story on this, but I told him this winter. I saw him for Florida, and I said to him, in August, Bob, 50 years ago, I started with the Bruins, and we have maintained a wonderful friendship 50 years later, he is. I have very few people I've met in my time who was if you're his friend, boy, you are something special, and he is so wonderful to me, to my family, and I had him for like 4 years until he left in that very tough situation, and of course he and Harry didn't that whole situation. I don't have to remind you all the Orr situation, and Harry took bullets for in organization for a long time, of which he had. I mean, it turned out to have absolutely no factor, and it was the agent. His agent got involved in the whole mess. But I will tell you this, which you'll enjoy. So after one of my many lunches one day was Harry and Orr and I at Lockover's private room upstairs, and I just sat there and talked, and they went back and forth for hours, talking about what he knew, what he didn't know, how he knew it, and it rekindled their friendship. And last year I was in Florida. Harry was in Florida. Orr was in Florida at the same time. And Orr said to me one day, have you talked to Harry? I said, oh, I talk to him every week. I said, he's at Bear Lakes and in West Palm Beach and enjoying it. I said, I was hoping to get him to have lunch, but he had some health issues and he wasn't real mobile at the time. And Orr said to me, have you got his number? I said, sure, it's in my phone here. Get him on the phone, he said. So I dial him up. He thinks it's me. Nate, how you doing? He said to me, it's not Nate. He says, it's Bobby Orr. So, Harry's going, oh, geez, great to chat with you and all that. And he said, Harry, I'm doing okay. I'm slowing down a bit. And, but, good. I can't complain. I'm doing okay. Bobby said, that's good because Nate and I are coming to have lunch with you tomorrow. We'll meet you at the clubhouse at noontime. Well, there was this long pregnant pause. He didn't feel like going, to be honest with you. I said he wasn't doing it. It wasn't at his best. But I said to Bobby, only you could get Harry out of his house and to the clubhouse at Bear Lakes. And we had I think once again, I sat there for 2 hours and we went back and forth. But did we have a great time? And Harry told me afterwards, God, that was one of the best lunches I've had in an awful long time. It was great. It was wonderful. So
yeah, he was pretty unbelievable when he come across all levels of athletes, and he certainly defined the higher end as opposed to these guys that come in with guns trying to get through the airport, the Patriots. I mean, really.
You are so right.
Tell me
imagine something. Go ahead.
No, what are you thinking?
I don't know. Why
are you still with the team?
And he still does. I mean, and that I think about this a lot, actually. When I see him a couple times a year, or I think about this. He was an era, and especially back then, where all athletes, but even the great ones like Orr, they did so many things for so many people, be it kids who were sick, be it guys who were, under the weather, down in the dumps or whatever. And they knew if you got a phone call from Bobby Orr, boy, that would turn your day around, if not your life, the rest of your life. I mean, to think that Orr would call. And I mean, if I had a dime for everybody I came across who said, Orr sent me this, Orr called, did this, whatever, I said I would be a wealthy man. And the most important part of it was, well, as important, is he didn't want anybody to know about it.
I know.
That, for me, separates the wheat from the chaff. I mean, that is, he is last year, 2 years ago, I guess, it was during the pandemic. He went around. I was down there in the summertime, and he was showing me something the guy had sent him from one of these police departments, like in Sandwich or someplace down on the Cape. He to thank them for the work that they had done, the effort they had put in during the pandemic, when, as we all know, things were a mess. He went around to every police station and took pictures, brought them some stuff. Nobody knew about it. Nobody. The only reason they got out is because one of the PIOs at one of the police departments called the Cape Cod Times or whatever and let them know. Otherwise, nobody would have known about it. I mean, what a wonderful trait. You can't put it into words. As you know, it's the antithesis of much of the stuff that happens today. Is these guys can't step out of the room without having their own cameras. Everybody else's. It's all choreographed and orchestrated. That's the last thing he wanted.
I told that story, Lynchy, about driving back from the Cape with Orr and Fisk. Huh?
Yeah. So tell it again. It's hilarious.
No, just driving back from with Tucker Anthony to go to the shot at Pro-Am. And it's just the chauffeur, because I was just going up there, and Orr and Fisk were in the car. And I was around Braintree, and we were talking, golf, whatever we talk about. And I said, hey, let me just ask you this question: if we had an accident right now, and if this car, went off the road, and the three of us were killed, what do you think the headline in the Herald would be? And Orr said, well, don't worry, you wouldn't be in it.
It was perfect. Which always, I had the most funny story. We were talking about the media, and when we first started chartering airplanes for games, so it was probably in the mid 80s, when it would take maybe a playoff charter, or if we had to go to the West Coast or up to Quebec, we couldn't get commercial flights, we would charter, and we would take the media people with us that wanted to go. So we had Wilson and Cusick and Pearson, and back in the day it was Leo Monahan and Tom Fitzgerald.
Fran Rosa.
What's that?
Fran Rosa came, absolutely. And we were on this really small, crowded plane going to Quebec City because we couldn't get a plane in there. And of course, the small plane would land. If it was a foot of snow, it didn't bother them. Just drop into the snow, and you'd have to climb out of the plane. It was crazy. But anyway, one night, Tom Fitzgerald said to me, he said, we really appreciate that you're taking the media on this flight, because otherwise it would have taken them days to get to Quebec City and back. And he said, I told my wife last night, God forbid this plane should go down, there'll be no mention whatsoever of my name in it, he said, and I would hope that somebody would let them know. And we laughed and all, and every time, I swear, once a year, I always thought of that line. He was serious. I hope somebody will let them know that I was on this plane. Let my next of kin know. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Hey, let me get this in for our good friend George Gray. If he couldn't take a plane into Quebec City, you could drive a car in there. And the best place to get a car was George Gray's Lexington Toyota. Right. You're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobie and I go. We go see our friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We both have been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right, and he'll get you into Quebec City. He'll get you in a Toyota, and he'll get you there. George's business is a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the great George Gray at Lexington Toyota. He will take care of you, and he is a huge Bruins fan, George is. So he will treat you right. Speaking of, I don't want to bring up bad memories, but with at least 20 years, you did not beat Montreal up there in a series, probably sometime in the 60s to about 86 or so. Does that sound right, Nate?
I wiped it from my memory, but I say you're about right, yes.
You used to do customs coming into the United States in Montreal, right?
That's correct, yes.
So every time you lost, they wouldn't even look at it. They just wave it through. Thank you. Come again. Can't wait to see
They
you.
used to. That's right. They used to put an autograph pad out so they could get autographs. That was the customs. Just have this wave and sign the thing and keep going.
But you finally beat them in '86.
Yeah, I believe it was either 86 or 88.
Okay, it might have been 88. But they stopped you and opened every bag.
That's exactly right.
Harry was out of his. Opened the puck bag.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And meanwhile, the Canadiens.
Yeah, they were good and mad.
Yeah, they were going home for probably games 3 and 4 in Boston. The Canadiens were already in their hotel in Boston, and I think they were still looking through the equipment bag, right?
You got a good memory. That's exactly right.
And when Harry was out of his mind, wasn't he?
Was in, because I mean, Harry's hate of Montreal knows no bounds. As you know, he used to. One of his favorite lines was every year, and he couldn't wait to get the assembled media after the game. Death, taxes, and the first penalty in Montreal. That was his favorite line to the mad at the officials, mad at everybody, and as in the old form, I can't speak as much now to the new place, but in the old Montreal form, most of the workers were just delightful. People were hospitable and nice and friendly and all, but all of his, and of course Harry is from Toronto, but all of his hockey playing life, though, up until the late '80s, Montreal, they had first crack at all the French Canadian players. Everything was tilted in their favor, and that pissed Harry off more than anything. That they got this break that no other team got, and he was incensed. And I said, as you know, it went on to a point where the apex being in when we the too many men game. I mean, it was. I mean, it's painful. I said it only half kiddingly that I wiped it from my mind because it was just the most horrific thing of my time there. It was and Harry, believe me, he would be like light a match and just fling it in his direction. It'd explode. I mean, he was just so irritated because if anything could go wrong, it did in those years.
You brought up the too many men thing, and I just would quickly transfer over to that and say, and in a general way, how much chaos did Don Cherry cause you?
Oh my word! But I like Don.
I know you do. You liked everybody.
Yeah. But
how much chaos?
I mean, How
much aggravation did Don Cherry put in your life?
Oh, are you kidding? Look what happened to my hair. Gone. But I mean, we go back. In fact, God rest him now. Was both of your colleagues, Clark Booth. We used to love telling the story. We in the '76, I believe, we played the Blackhawks in the first, at best of 3 back in the day. First round we lose, and Cherry's pronouncement after the game is they were going to send the next game. They were going to send Stan Mikita back to Czechoslovakia in a pine box. Well, people went absolutely. I mean, the league is calling, the media, and Cherry, of course, just storms off into the night, and everybody's going, geez, did he, what can I say? I mean, I was speechless, right? And, I mean, he was, oh my God, I'm telling you, he was, but the interesting thing was he and Harry had a lot in common. Because Cherry was mad. Harry let him go after, I think he had 5 years. Harry let him go, and he was there, and they didn't speak for years, but they're back on good terms.
Why did Harry let him go?
Well, that's a good question. I'll tell you something, and you guys know this. Harry had a philosophy. I mean, Harry was a player coach in the Bruins organization. When for I believe it was 2 years, the Bruins top farm team in the mid '60s was in Minneapolis, and Harry was the player coach. Imagine, I think of such things today, but anyway, he had a philosophy about coaching longevity. That was players tune you out after a certain time, and so I can't say I was surprised. He was, he would monitor. He was around a lot. He sort of didn't interfere, but he was around. And if he thought that things were winding down, if the players stopped listening, or he thought it was, I wouldn't say it was unique to hockey, but it was sort of. He felt, it was a sport where you had to get pumped up every night. And you had to be, it was the kind of game that you needed to be up and ready to go every night. And he thought that that coaches had a shelf life to them, basically. And he acted like that the entire 30 years he was a general manager. Some guys might last a little longer than others, but he felt there was a shelf life to them because guys would tune them out.
I think that's legit. I think a lot of sports, I think pro football is kind of the same way in many ways. But I always thought that it was Cherry kind of fomented the us against them.
Oh yeah, and the them were Harry too.
We are the team, and the management is not us.
Absolutely right. As it didn't bother me. We used to. I said he could make my life difficult sometimes. It was water off a duck's back for me. It didn't bother me. But Harry, would take it personally and all. And yet, some of the funniest nights I've spent in my life, I would be riding in the well of the bus in front, and the coach always sat in the front row. I'd be in the well of the bus, and Harry would be sitting with coming back from all over wherever we were. Harry had always, usually, unless they were feuding about playing somebody or something Harry didn't like, then Harry'd go sit on the other side. But if they were on good terms, they'd sit together in the bus, and they would tell stories. Because they have a couple of beers going, the bus would go into some other town, and they would tell stories back and forth about minor league hockey. And Harry and Cherry loved to share this one story about some place they played. So Harry played minor league hockey, and Cherry played, except for a handful of games, he was a minor league guy as well. And they were telling some stories. It might have been like in Rochester or someplace that Harry got some award, and a couple of years later, Cherry got the same award. It was like for the MVP of the team. And Cherry's, I'm all excited. Gee, I got an award, and they're going to give me some kind of a gift, and the gift was a bucket of apples. And Cherry says, "This is it?" He said, "Yeah, this is it." And because they're laughing away, and they've got the beers going, and they're telling me, just laughing their rear ends off, having the greatest time telling stories about minor league sports when they were in it. And Don Cherry used to love to tell the story about Eddie Shore, who was a great Bruin from way back when. But in my time, Eddie Shore owned the Springfield Indians, and Cherry played for him, and he was a tough customer. And I mean, they were operating on a shoestring budget. When we would go out there to play, he used to play at the Big E, the Eastern States Exposition. I'm sure it's still there. I don't know if the actual rink is still there, but it was a barn, literally a barn, and they would have some stands on the side, and Eddie owned the building. I believe he still got some connection to the Big E. I don't know what it is. He's long gone. His son was involved in it. Anyway, so this barn, we'd go out and play, and it was dark and shadows all over the place. It was not conducive to big time hockey, but it was the American Hockey League, and they were a charter member of the American Hockey League going back into I think the 20s. Anyway, we went out there to play one night, more than one night. We played probably 4 or 5 years preseason games here, and with 1 minute to go, the announcer would come in. 1 minute to go in the game. All of a sudden, I was sitting in the back row there where the press box was, and I looked up and I saw the lights going off one by one by one by one. Eddie was, and it had a limp to him to boot, was limping around. The lights were on pull chains, and with 1 minute to go, he went around, started pulling all the lights. So by the time the game ended, the place would be in complete darkness. He didn't care if people tripped or whatever. Darkness, so he didn't have to add to the electric bill because he told me that they were on a very tight budget. I said, Eddie, people are going to get killed here. Guys trying to walk out. It was pitch darkness. But that was the way he, and I remember telling Don that story. He said, oh, hell, he used to do it all the time. They wouldn't let you get another stick and all this kind of stuff. It was minor leagues at its best. It was great.
When you left the Bruins, many of us thought that you were destined to go to the Red Sox. Did you want to go to the Red Sox?
Well, it was discussed. It never got to a point where I had a couple opportunities. One was discussed way back when. The answer is I don't know. I sure did like what I had no reason to ever want to leave the Bruins. Even when I had to leave, I didn't want to leave.
And you left because who let you go?
Well, the current management, the same. They brought in
Neely? With Neely?
No. Neely came
You're
out.
talking about Jacobs, Charlie Jacobs.
Yeah. And they brought in Chiarelli, a new general manager, and he was like running the show and all that. And they just, and you know what? I said I had 34 years. I had no complaints, right? But and again, I want to tell either one of you that I used to, when I took the job in 1973, I replaced two guys, the Garden PR guy and the Bruins PR guy. One was 75, one was 65. And they wanted to get a younger kid, and I was 24 years old. They said, let's do this. But when I took over for those guys, I felt it was almost an obligation to make sure that they were always welcome to come back. And I went out of my way to call them. One of the guys ended up going to Florida, but he used to come back up. Another guy lived out in like Boxford or someplace. I mean, I used to call them and say, please come in. I wanted them to feel like they were still a part of it. And because that's the way I was brought up. That's the way we were brought up. Unfortunately, and it's probably still the case today, it was the case 16 years ago, institutional memory is a bad thing now, in most cases. Not always, but in most cases. When I was brought up and when I started, institutional memory meant a lot. A lot. These guys were the guys that set this franchise afloat, kept it going, promoted it, and I made sure that I kept them in the loop. And because that's what I thought was the right thing to do.
Well, that was the way you were brought up, apparently.
Yeah, what's that?
That's the way you were brought up.
Yeah, well, that's right. Now we're all brought up. And it's new people come in. I saw it, but they have every right to do what they want. I don't harbor any ill will. Stuff happens. I said I had a hell of a run. I loved it. I got no complaints. But and I used to use the term, and you guys see it too. It's not just confined to hockey or to me. That especially a lot of people come in. They think the business started when they started. There's no. It's the truth. I mean, they don't. They don't want to think that. God, nobody could have done this before me. I mean, how the hell did they? How did they get the show on the air when I wasn't there? Right? Of course not. I started it. I was there, and we've all got stories like that. And that was what I sort of felt there as well. And but I said the one thing I was damn glad that I forced myself is not to go around saying, woe is me, I got screwed, I got this. No, I had 34 great years. You look like you guys had 30 plus years in the business. I mean, you could have had to work for a living. This is a great life we had, right? Why should I be? Why should I? Now, having said that, I haven't been to a game. I went to every game for 34 years. I haven't been to a game in 16 years. But not because I'm sure if I wanted to go, I'm sure I could. I have enough friends to get in, but I didn't feel comfortable. No, nothing to offend anybody. I just didn't feel comfortable going, and I still don't today. I have a grandson just turned 16 years old. He loves sports. The good news is that's the one thing he got from his grandpa. He loves sports. the better news is he's an athlete, which his grandpa was not. But I've taken him to Celtics games. When we have a picture downstairs of he and I standing on the Celtics logo. I've taken him to Fenway Park hundreds of times, out on the field.
But not to a Bruins game.
Not to a Bruins game, no. And he loves hockey too. He loves hockey and he watches it. And his father played high school hockey. His father's a big hockey guy too. And so we watched games together, but never in person. I just, I don't feel comfortable. That's all. I just don't.
I get it. I think Mike gets it too in a big way. And I just want to go back to the Red Sox. Was it true that it was Gene Yawkey didn't want to hire you because you were Jewish?
Yeah, I've heard that story too. I don't buy it. I don't buy it, Bob. Certainly it was never ever brought up to me in any way, shape, or manner. When I especially in the mid 70s, early 70s, I started working for the Bruins. I had a lot of friends that worked over there. I used to sit there. I used to go to a lot of ball games. I was single. I loved baseball. I would sit in the back row with Eddie Kenny, the old scouting director, with smoked cigars. We had Eddie Kenny and I and Hank Soar. Remember Hank Soar, the old baseball umpire? Yeah. He was a supervisor. We would sit there, smoke cigars, and I listened to those guys tell stories. I mean, they were great to me. Treated me really well.
I think most people in the media, I know Mike and I certainly have agreed on this. It was a lock that you would get that Red Sox job. That's what everybody. I mean, here was the best PR executive VP or whatever your title was around, available.
No, that's very nice. But I never got to where I had to make a decision, and it would have been very tough because I loved working for Harry. I had a chance to go to work for the NHL office in New York. I actually had an interview. I won't get into all the details. I had an interview once with David Stern.
Oh, did Marty Walsh kick you out of the job?
Marty Walsh, yeah. That's it. I'm telling you, it was good, but no regrets. I stayed where I was, and I was very happy. And I got married. Your kids, your flexibility is changing, and your thinking changes and all. But no complaints. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I said I certainly spent many wonderful nights. Not only watching the Red Sox, but then, as you also both can remember, spending many nights post game in the Red Sox press room, where I saw things in that press room, especially as the night went on, things that involving great names, and Howard Cosell in a heated argument with somebody who knows, and they were
Jack Craig, probably right. When Jack Craig
was probably right. Billy Martin coming up after a Yankees game, looking for our old friend Jack Satter. Remember Jack Satter from the Colonial Divisions? Jack would be a terrific guy, wonderful friend of mine. I love Jack, but he had Billy promoting Yankee Franks at Yankee Stadium because he was a minority partner, if you remember, of Steinbrenner in the Yankees, right? Looking for the characters that would come in there, right? Jim Martin and Ned Woods. Late in the night, I won't get into all the details, but you can imagine the craziness, the stuff that went on there, right? And I loved every minute of it. And it was, so they were the Red Sox folks back in the Haywood and Buddy days, and then the Harrington days to follow. Couldn't have been nicer to me. I enjoyed. It was one of my favorite things to do in the summertime was go to a Red Sox game, smoke cigars, and then go into the press room afterwards and watch all these people come in.
What would you have done with the chaos with Haywood and Buddy and Gene?
Oh my word, I don't know. And I liked them both very much.
Tony Canigliaro night, Buddy comes up to the.
Oh,
who's doing the thinking?
Exactly. I don't know what and Buddy was an old trainer, and Haywood was a terrific. I got to know Haywood really well. He was on the Nesson board with me back in the day when they had control of the Red Sox, and he was a fascinating guy, Haywood, and it was a crazy time, though. I mean, the answer is I don't know. It's things. I was always thankful that I had to deal with some as you both some sad things, and we had Levier tragedy. We had I've had all kinds of stuff, but I never had that. I never had partners going at one another and all that. That would have been a nightmare. So
let me ask you, there's a couple individual incidents. I don't know how you handle them. Mike Milbury with the shoe in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. Believe me. And
Michael, my second night on television.
Was it?
That was Christmas Eve. I'll never
December
forget
23rd. Absolutely correct.
Christmas Eve. I went on television. That was my second night on, and that fight happened.
Believe me, and of course I was at the game. I was at every game. Harry and I'll tell you, we were walking down. The press box was in the middle of the stands at Madison Square Garden. So we were walking down after the game, and you had to go to the corner where the team went off to get to get to the dressing rooms, and we were within 30, 35 feet. Harry's chatting back and forth about this, that, the other thing, and all of a sudden I see Harry going, oh, blank. Over the glass they come. Jesus Christ, Harry. I said, what should we do? He says, let's get the hell out of here. We ran to the other side. We're scared to get. I mean, these, we saw the guy, the initial guy, and of course that was the very last time. The glass was low. That in those days, in certain areas, the glass would be high, and then they'd bring it down. So fans could reach over, and the guy reached over. And I said I was probably at that time maybe 50, 60 feet away. We see the guy reach over, and he's trying to grab Stan Jonathan's stick. Yanks it out of his hand. Jonathan gives him a whack like this. Next thing you know, O'Reilly's going over, then Milbury's going over, then McNabb's going over. So Harry and I are standing well back in the, we don't want any part of this thing, right? But, I mean, I had a bird's eye view of, Milbury whacking the guy with a shoe, McNabb beating the pulp out of some guy, right? And I mean, it was absolutely crazy. But I tell you, and I've talked with Milbury and I have discussed this a million times. It was this December 23rd. I said, geez, it's good to see everybody in New York's in the Christmas spirit, right? I'm like whacking each other, and our guys have gone back at them. So there was a longtime security chief at Madison Square Garden named Dennis Ryan, now deceased, but a wonderful guy, a wonderful friend of mine. And he was he's looking for me after the game. Nate gives me a signal, come over. He said, I've called the bureau, whatever, in New York, and we're going to give you a police escort from, did I lose you there? Police escort from Madison Square Garden to the Midtown Tunnel, because we were going to take a charter. It was Christmas, as Bob said, 23rd of December. We were going to charter from LaGuardia home. So you go through the Midtown Tunnel to get out to LaGuardia. So I said, great. He said, and we brought the bus underneath in the building. The bus used to be right at the gate. No, we're going to bring it in. People are outside. I mean, it is a scary madhouse, right? So they bring the bus in. So now I'm in my usual spot in the well. I said, oh, this is going to be fun. We're back in the bus. The guy's backing the bus out. People are flinging stuff at us, trying to rock the bus. People pushing the bus. I mean, I'm telling you, I was scared to death. I just sort of sunk down underneath. I didn't even want to look. I mean, I hear stuff, crashing up against the glass, and it was horrible. But a good story is, though, so Dennis said, I've got a motorcycle escort to take you, as I said, to the start of the tunnel. So as is the case only in New York, this is an only in New York story. You get 2 blocks away from Madison Square Garden. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. I mean, there's 18 million people on every corner. nobody knows that. What is this? Why is this police escort? They just everybody does their own thing, right? So we've got like 6 motorcycle cops, 2 in front, 2 on the side, 2 on the back. So we're driving down one of these side streets. We finally get on to like 2nd Avenue, about down, and they pull up to the front of the entrance to the Midtown Tunnel, and the guy was slow down. So I said, the bus driver, open up the door. So he cracks the door. I said, thank you, fellas, very much. We appreciate the escort, right? One of New York's finest, standing right next to me, gives me the middle finger. So I said, jeez. So of course I couldn't wait. I said, I called my friend Dennis Ryan. I said, the next chief, and I said, Dennis, you won't believe this, but one of your former colleagues gave me the middle finger. I just opened the door to say thanks a lot. Wasn't interested in any kind of peace offering at all. Just wanted me to get the hell out of New York, I guess.
Well, Nate, if I could give you one of these campers, I would do that right now. Right? Why don't you let me do this?
Okay, you go.
Cold Springs. If I could give you one of these right now for making this appearance, I would. Unfortunately, I'm not authorized to. But now's the time to see a fantastic selection of motorhomes at Cold Springs RV. Go check out the deals. Enjoy the pressure-free environment. They also have a large display of pop-ups for summer camping fun. July 4th, right around the corner, so get ready with a great deal today. This is for you, Nate. Learn more online at coldspringsrv.com. Make it a summer to remember with a camper from Cold Springs RV. That's Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire. It's West Manchester, where, Nate, you made that first trip up to that radio show.
We could have used that camper that night. It was 10 feet of snow.
You were the best.
So you know what, Nate? Cold Springs is still in the process. You remember John Madden had a Madden cruiser?
Yes, absolutely famous.
Commissioned him to make a Lobel cruiser. It's going to be everything custom made, everything Bob wants inside there.
I like it.
Bob has offered the use of the Lobel cruiser to all our guests. You get to drive cross country in it, but you have to take one person, dead or alive, one person that you would like to drive cross country with and have a conversation with and listen. And who would you come up with to ride in the Lobel cruiser?
That is a darn good. And I remembered about the Madden cruiser because it actually enticed me to go and order one. Madden was the first one to have a turducken. You know what a turducken is?
Yes. Yeah.
The turkey, duck, and chicken, right? All stuffed in the. And he was the first one to have it. So we were. I think it was maybe in Atlanta. Anyway, it was at Thanksgiving time. But, back in the day, we used to play on Thanksgiving and play on Christmas. And I actually saw it on the menu, and I had a turducken.
You can't believe it. You're the only person I know that's ever had one of those.
Yeah, and it was good. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was different, spicy, But anyway,
who would you ride with?
That's a very good question. I still, because he's my friend, but I would probably pick Orr.
Yeah,
I would probably pick Orr.
I think he'd be good too. Yeah.
And I said I see him a couple times a year. I see him in Florida, and we always find, well, as we are. I said he's turned 75. I'm 74. We always find new and different things to talk about, or we, at least to us, they're new and different. We may have talked to him before, but we're getting to the stage now we can't remember what the hell we talked about. So we keep bringing it up. We laugh, but we still have a good laugh. So that's the good news, right?
Let me ask this. Speaking about buses, down in Hartford, Terry O'Reilly, was there a car blocking the bus? Is that what that was?
Yes. And the part of it is actually this is not a funny story at all, and it never got out. It never got much publicity, if any publicity. They played in the Hartford Civic Center, and they brought the bus underneath. And I don't think Terry would mind me telling this story. I hope not. But one of his boys had a lot of health issues. And at the time he nobody knew it. He'd gone in the hospital again, and he was in anxious, needless to say, to get home and get over to the hospital and see his boy. And some fool had parked literally right in front of the bus. So we were trying to get security people to get this thing out of it and get going. And so that was the story behind it. Everybody made it sound like, like O'Reilly was mad because they lost or won or whatever. I forget all the scenario about it. But that was sort of the story behind the story, that it was a family issue that he needed to get home. And we eventually got it straightened out. But I remember it well.
All right, a happier memory. Phil Esposito night when Ray Bourque took his jersey off.
Yes.
Whose idea was it, and how did you pull it off?
All right. Well, speaking of Hartford, the night before we played in Hartford, and Harry Sinden and Tom Johnson and I, as we were wont to do, we drove. I was driving. We drove to Hartford, had dinner, went to the game, driving back, and there was a plan in place just to do the usual, here's the uniform, and guess what? It's going up in the air, right? And in the course of conversation, despite the fact that an awful lot of people now claim they either knew it or they were behind it, or nobody knew it, because we didn't know it until the night before when we were driving home from Hartford. And so the three of us were talking about it all, and somehow we came up with the idea. Who it was, I can't exactly remember well. The idea was to have Bourque take his jersey off, and give it to Phil, and the new jersey would have 77. So it was as simple as that, and we did a pretty damn good job of keeping it quiet, because all that day, and we had to get Dan Canny and Frosty Forrester were our trainers, and we had to let them know to get a jersey ready for Bourque and one to give to Phil. We had one ready to give to Phil. Harry, one of Harry's, he has no problem with retired numbers, but he always thought that they should be called honored numbers. So that if somebody, he said, there were certain numbers, like 4. Nobody was going to wear number 4 again because it was iconic, right? Number 4 for Bruins. But, some of them, some of those numbers, well, they're obviously still retired today. Guys who haven't played since the 20s or 30s. And he always thought, he said, I have no problem with, he liked to refer to them as honored numbers. They want to be honored, but it's the name. We're honoring the name and the number. And I remember he brought it up sometime to somebody, and oh God, it caused. We had relatives of some guy that I had never heard of that his number retired in the Bruins. Sending in letters from someplace in Greenland or someplace. It was all over Canada. People screaming about it. So he decided. I said, it's probably better off to leave this idea on the table where we picked it up, because it wasn't gonna fly. But it was a great night. And Phil, I saw Phil a couple of years ago. Also, I was a busy guy for the week I was in Florida, but I saw Phil, and to this day, it's probably 2 things in his career that he'll never forget. The day he got the call that he was traded to New York, which still sticks in his craw almost 50 years later, and the night he got to go to the Garden to see his number retired and to see Bourque give it up, right? And it was spur of the moment, right off the seat of our pants, driving home from Hartford, to think. We just said, this would be a good thing to do. That was one of our, that and the Orr retirement night, which was in 1979. When we retired his number. It was those are 2 of my favorite, and the closing of the building, obviously another great night. But some not we didn't overdo it, but the nights we did it, it was pretty special. I would just quickly tell you, there was when I noticed the other night when Las Vegas won the Stanley Cup, that Bettman came out to present the trophy as he does every year, usually to a raucous booing. Everybody boos. You can barely hear him talking. It's become focused on, and it happens every year, and he laughs about it and whatnot. But so it was January 9th, 1979 was the night we retired Orr's number. I'll never forget the night. It was, among other things, we were playing the Russians, which was a big deal in itself in those days because the Russians obviously hadn't come to the NHL. There was an awful lot of, we had protests outside the building. People were lighting the trash cans afire in North Station. We had a circus going on there that night, and the big thing was to have Orr's number retired, right? That was so we had all these dignitaries come out. We had an old ratty old carpet. Today they've got logos on everything and the video things. We had nothing. We didn't even have a sound system that worked. People had to yell because the sound system was so bad in the old building, right? Anyway, so I'm sort of putting together, sketching who we're going to invite. We had the governor there, the mayor there, and all these dignitaries. And I said, and Tom Fitzgerald, you remember Tom Fitzgerald, the old Globe hockey writer, right, and golf writer for many years. He said to me, I would be honored if you needed an MC. I'd be honored. I think of Orr as like my favorite. I said, you know what, Tom, that's probably a good idea because the radio and TV guys will be busy building up this whole night. Why don't you do the emceeing of the event? So we have all these people lined up. So we have the governor, the mayor, all Orr's family. You name it. We have a cast of thousands out there, and Tom Fitzgerald goes to the mic, and I type out a list of who he's going to introduce, and so at the time, Clarence Campbell was the president of the NHL, a very, very distinguished guy. Clarence Campbell was a prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials. This guy was a big time lawyer, big time military guy. This guy was very, very highly thought of in Canada and around the world. He said, so at any rate, he comes out and he was getting up there in years. It was near the end of his tenure. And out he comes. And then next we invite the Honorable Clarence Campbell, president of the National Hockey League. And as only could happen in Boston Garden, especially from the second balcony, boo! They start, booing him. And so Tom gets quite flustered by this and announces to the 13,909 in attendance, plus the radio and TV, see here, he says to them, do not boo the president of the National Hockey League. It is unbecoming of people in Boston. He started giving him a lecture. I'm going, come on, Tom, we got to get moving here. He was lecturing the fans because they unleashed this, as I recalled at the time, I think it might have been O'Reilly. He suspended. We had somebody who got suspended for some other thing. And of course, he was the president of the league. He did the suspensions. So the people were good and irritated. And did they unload on him? This poor old guy is all hunched over. But I said, a brilliant guy, right? Comes out on the ice and people, second balcony guys yelling. Tom was lecturing them for 5 minutes about this is not the right way to treat the president of the league. This is Boston. We was going on and on and on. I'm going, oh my God, we're going to be here for an hour with this. We finally let it go, but I never forgot that. And every time I see Bettman or any commissioner, I always think of Tom lecturing the crowd about how to address Clarence Campbell, right? Stuff you think about. God.
We could go on for a couple more hours, Nate. I tell you, it was stuff we could talk about. But you were great. We're really glad you were able to make it today.
Two of my favorite guys right here. I tell you, in all sincerity, I'm honored to be a part of it. Two of you both know my feelings, both of you. And we had a lot. And you know what? We had a lot of fun for all the years. And no matter what they do to you, what they say about you, whatever happens, you can't take it away. You can't take it away.
Oh, that goes for all of us.
Well, good.
But Nate Greenberg has been our guest for Bob Lobel and Mike Lynch. I hope you've enjoyed UnAnchored Boston, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.